Many people don't like George Bush and his administration. But not liking George Bush and not liking his policies is not the same thing as being guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And one of the things that I urge you to do is to buy a copy of the verdict that we're delivering today, in particular to take a look at the standards section and the standards document that's contained within it. Because we did not proceed from the fact that we did or did not like George Bush and his policies. We proceeded from the fact that objectively there are such things as war crimes and crimes against humanity. And we had to apply those criteria to decide what to prosecute the administration for, and then the judges had to use those criteria in order to determine whether or not he was actually guilty of those. War crimes are fairly clear and cut and understandable and established in international law. War crimes consist of using prohibited weapons, they consist of attacking civilian populations, and of course the most egregious war crime of all is the launching of wars of aggression. Crimes against humanity, however, are sometimes a little more subtle. And the reason for that is that the existing laws on crimes against humanity are first of all written by the great imperial powers themselves, and they have a tendency when codifying these things to do it in a way that exculpates themselves from some of their own crimes. The second reason is that new phenomena occur all in the world that do not and have not yet been codified into international law. So it was necessary in order for this commission to proceed to, first of all, define what we meant by crimes against humanity. And we did that in this document, which I want you to read, but I'll just read you the one clear paragraph. Crimes against humanity are brutal crimes, not necessarily isolated incidents, but that involve large and systematic actions, often cloaked with official authority. These include mass murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other humane acts perpetrated against a population and conducted in wartime or not. Apartheid and persecution on political, ethnic, and gender grounds have also been considered inhumane acts causing great suffering and therefore crimes against humanity. When we set out to apply these policies and this definition consistently across the board, we found out a couple things. One of which is that there's more than one way to kill millions of people. We've talked a lot today about war and about torture, but when we began to look, for example, at this government's policy towards AIDS programs in Africa, we found that they were imposing a Christian fundamentalist regime on these policies, using their economic power over very poor countries to compel them to stop distributing condoms and instead to preach abstinence only as the way to protect people from AIDS in Africa. This, my friends, is a genocidal policy. And because of this, we took this up as one of the crimes against humanity to be prosecuted. By contrast, people have asked us, well, why didn't you take up the NSA spying? Well, the wiretapping of all of our telephones and the collection of all of our telephone records is indeed a violation of the FISA Act of 1978. It's probably an impeachable offense, but it's not a crime against humanity under the standards that we're working under. So I want people to understand that we actually worked from very clear standards. Another arena that we took up that we felt was extremely important was this administration's policy towards global warming. Why? Because they've set out to deliberately deny science. They actually pulled and edited reports by their own scientific teams that reported the evidence for global warming and basically attempted to deny it. What we know today, however, is that with the continuing melting of the ice caps, the oceans are going to raise 10, 15, 20 feet. If you have a mansion out on the Hamptons, you might have to pull it back from the beach a little bit, but if you live in Bangladesh, where are you going to go? Whole countries in this globe are going to be put underwater. Millions and millions of people are going to be displaced from their homes. This is a crime against humanity, and this is one of the issues which our commission took up. And finally, we looked at what this government did in its policy with regard to before, during, and after the tragedy of the hurricane that hit New Orleans. This was a man-made tragedy, as we have documented in our findings. This did not have to happen. The government pulled money from the construction on the levees and spent it on the war in Iraq. The government knew 3 days in advance that a Category 4 or 5 hurricane was going to hit this city, and they did nothing in order to evacuate people. And then after it happened, they told people to go to the Astrodome, where they simply abandoned them. And when private parties tried to bring buses, for example, in to evacuate people from the Astrodome, they were blocked by military authorities and told you cannot go in there. At the same time, mercenaries who had been serving in Iraq in these companies like Blackwater and so on, one group came up from Texas from a company called Instinctive Shooting International. They were flown in helicopters into New Orleans to guard the private property of large corporations and the homes of rich people, while the poor people of New Orleans were allowed to starve and drown. Prisoners were abandoned in the jail cells there as the water were rising, as their guards left them locked in the cells, and our commission took evidence from prisoners who were left in that situation. These are crimes against humanity. I want to thank the effort that our judges did. Our panel of judges, one of whom you met here today, Ann Wright, worked for a year after taking the 5 days of testimony and the voluminous documentary evidence that they were presented with, and brought together this criminal finding this administration guilty of crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity. Read the document, get the DVDs that we have of the testimony so that you can hear it for yourself. These people are criminals and they have to go.